Good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Armchair Traveler of 2023. It's going to be a good one. We are going to learn all about Paris with Jayne Boisvert, author of the Cheapo Snob series. And I will let her do introduce herself the rest of the way. But before we get started, just a couple of things. Um, if you have any questions for Jayne, as we go along or at the end, you can put them in the Q&A section or the chat section at the bottom of your screen, and I will read them to Jayne. You won't be able to talk or see each other, so it can feel a little funny, but everyone's a Zoom pro now, so we're all set. We've all done it a bunch of times. But that's how we're going to handle questions and answers tonight. We'll have a little bit of extra time for Q&A at the end, but if you have something while we are going along and watching Jayne's presentation, feel free to interject. And thank you all for being here. All right, Jayne, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. I'd really like to thank you personally for having me speak tonight and the Patent Free Library as well. I think this idea of an armchair traveler series is great, and what's better than Paris? I mean, come on, everybody loves Paris. Well, almost everybody. I shouldn't say it that way. But anyway, my name is Jayne Boisvert. Hannah pronounced it perfectly. I was very proud. And I was a high school professor who then got her PhD and became a college professor. I taught in Troy, New York at Russell Sage College. I married a Mainer, and so after we retired, we moved to Maine. We live in Georgetown, but right now, I hate to tell you, but I'm in Florida. But anyway, hopefully tonight's presentation will warm you all up. I did. Let's see. I'll start this. Let's see, right here, I believe we'll do. Let's see. Yeah, I thought I would warm you up by showing you this picture. If any of you has ever been to Paris, you probably recognize this scene. And if I could hear you, I would ask you what it is. But I assume that you all know that this is the Jardin du Luxembourg, the Luxembourg Gardens, and that's the Senate in the background. But I really put it up there to show you that spring is on the way. It might take a little while to come, but you'll have beautiful flowers once again like this. So tonight we're here to talk about Paris and Parisians. And I always like to start out. I don't think any one of you has ever heard me speak about this book. So I will tell you if I can get it to advance. Let's see. Let's go. There we go. I usually start out by telling how this whole thing got started. We have a son in Boston, and after I retired, he said, "Mom, you should really write a guidebook to Paris because you love that city." And you could call it a cheapo snob because he always says that my husband and me are cheapo snobs, which if we had an in person, I could say to you, "What do you think that is?" And you would say to me, is it someone who wants to pay the smallest amount and get the biggest amount out of it?" And I would say, exactly. In fact, he always exaggerates and says that we want to pay 25 cents for anything wonderful that we buy. Okay. Anyway, so and then I spoke to a professor of mine at SUNY Albany, and she said, "Well, if you're going to do that, you should include where famous Americans lived," because she had been in Paris at an English language bookstore on the right bank. And they had said to her, "People are always coming in here wondering where famous Americans had lived in Paris." And so that prompted book one, which is called Pilgrimage to Paris. And then after I finished that, I asked my publishers, what can I do for a follow up? And they actually suggested the other two books, the second one being the one we're going to talk about tonight, which includes famous French people, some of whom you will be quite familiar to you and others will be new to you, but hopefully you'll learn something and be entertained along the way. And then the third book, which just came out in October, I believe, is called Paris and the World. And that all three books have typical travel guide stuff in them, like things to see, like museums and churches and things like that. All three books. But then the first book deals with Americans, the second book deals with famous French people, and then this third book that just came out deals with famous foreigners who were not Americans. So if that makes sense to all of you, anyway, that is the background of it. So it's the Cheapo Snob series. And tonight we're going to talk about lodging because this figures into book 2. There are many places to stay in Paris, and we're going to talk about a lot of them, and some of them are going to be quite shocking to you, I'm sure. But renting an apartment is probably your best bet in terms of price and comfort, but you have to be wary of certain things. Not every apartment is created equal, as I'm sure you know. You might want to find out the square meters because that's how it's going to be listed probably by your French host. And just to give you an idea, this is in book 1, but I'll tell you that a typical American hotel room is like 25 to 30 meters. So you probably don't want anything smaller than that. But because one time, the reason that prompted this is one time my husband and I were sitting on a bench in Paris, and this lady was sitting next to us, and we started speaking with her. And it turned out she was from New Zealand, but the apartment she rented was so small she couldn't stand to be in there. And so that's why she was sitting out on a park bench. So again, square meters, at least 25 to 30 meters. Which floor is it on? Many of you probably know this already, that the French way and really the European way of counting the floors is different from the US. Here, of course, we have first floor, second floor, third floor, etc. Over there, the first floor in France is called the rez-de-chaussée, which means it's like the lobby floor, the ground floor. And so if you rent an apartment and it says troisième étage, so we read third floor, it's not the third floor, it's the fourth floor. So that's fine if an apartment has an elevator. Even though elevators can be quite small, at least that would help you when you arrive with your luggage or when you pick up groceries to bring back to your apartment and have to lug them all the way up. It's nice even if the elevator is small, as long as it's there. So another thing is, which arrondissement is it in? And we're going to talk about arrondissement in a minute. Arrondissement means district. And the city of Paris is divided into 20 districts. The area around the Seine, where Notre Dame is and the Louvre and everything, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are very close in and very close to all the monuments that you might want to see. As a result, that's a very expensive part of town. My husband and I like to stay in the 14th. It's a little bit out of Paris. It's on the other side of the Jardin de Luxembourg, but it's easy walking to get into the town. What you probably don't want is to be stuck way out, like in the 20th, unless you want to go see Père Lachaise Cemetery. There's not too much to see out there. Also 17th, 18th, some of these neighborhoods are kind of poor and, as I say, a long distance from the things you want to see. So pay attention to the arrondissement if you're renting an apartment. Excuse me. For cheapos, again, if we were speaking in person, I would ask you what couch surfing is. And probably some of you, especially if you know young people, your children, for example, or grandchildren perhaps, would know what couch surfing is. As the name indicates, it has something to do with couches. Actually, it's an organization and you pay a yearly fee. The yearly fee is very reasonable, like $40 a year, but it allows you to get in contact with other people who are on this site and stay either on their couch, as the name indicates, or if you're lucky, they have a spare bedroom and there's a bed for you. I first heard about this from a teaching assistant from France who was at my school, and she loved it. She did it everywhere. And, I think it's safe. It's not for me, like that. And also on the right, you see hostels. Hostels, some of them are greatly improved from our old days when we were young backpackers, but and they could be like 25 to $50 a night, extremely reasonable, great for cheapos. But maybe some of us are past that. But again, hostels have improved. Some of them even have private rooms nowadays. Some of them, on the other hand, you have to bring your towels or maybe even your sheets. You have to find out all of that in advance. But even if these ideas are not for you, you might be able to help out somebody else who would like these kinds of places to stay. So that's for the very cheap. My husband and I normally either rent an apartment, which we did in 2013 when I was researching book one. So that was 10 years ago. We rented an apartment through sabbaticalhomes.com because we were both college professors. So if you are professors, you might look into sabbatical homes, and we got an extremely good deal. We stayed there for 5 months and had the time of our life. But on the other hand, if we're going there for just a few days, we might stay at one of these hotels. They're both in the Fifth. We have stayed at both of them. The first one on the left is not to be confused with the Hotel Vendôme in the Place Vendôme. That's very, very expensive. But this one is a little two-star hotel. It doesn't have air conditioning, so if you're going in August, it might not be the best choice. It's pretty basic. I think the breakfast was included. It's on a relatively quiet street. The room was small, as was the bathroom. Bathrooms in Paris are notoriously small, except for the, luxury class. But we've stayed there many times. I would say 4 or 5 times we've stayed at the Hotel Vendôme Saint-Germain. The other one is a three-star hotel, the Hotel Henri IV. It's in a very nice location. I can't remember, it's in the book, but it might be the Rue des Écoles. It's in a very good area. How we got that one is that my husband went to their website and got a very good deal. That was the nicest hotel room in Paris we ever stayed in. It was spacious. It had a small refrigerator and a microwave, which we normally don't have in Paris hotel rooms. It had cross ventilation, and it was really a wonderful room. I checked though last week when I was preparing for tonight, and these hotels have gone up in price. Just today, I asked my husband, how much do we pay at the Vendôme Saint-Germain or Henri IV? And he said, oh, probably 100, maybe $120 a night. And now they're in the $200 range. So, as anything, prices go up. But checking the hotel's website might get you a deal if you can try that out. Also in the book, I talk about all these other, like Hotel Ibis. It's a chain. It looks like Ibis. That's a chain, very Spartan rooms, but cheap and functional. There's also Novotel. There are a lot of chains like that, again, in the book that you'll find that are possibly more for the cheapos. For the snobs, on the other hand, well, the world is your oyster. Condé Nast, you probably have heard about, is a magazine. And every year they have like a Reader's Choice Award. So the readers who are, you can imagine, not your hostel staying people, send in their recommendations. And these, let's see, I wrote down, I think these, the ones on the left, the Reader's Choice Awards, are in the $400 range a night. So I can't see us ever staying there. And then on the other hand, the Traveler Gold List Award, those are in the $450 to $900 a night per room category. So this again is for snobs. It's if you really value the comfort of the room and the size of the room and all of that. It really depends upon you. And that's the other thing these books talk about. You have to determine what part of you is cheapo and what part of you is snob, or maybe you're all one or all the other. I don't know. But Anyway, it helps you determine where you are and then where you should eat or stay. But speaking of gold list, Condé Nast also has a list of palace hotels. These are like where Beyonce stays, okay, like at Le Meurice. She stayed there at the Belle Étoile suite, a two-story suite, if you can imagine. On the left, the bedroom in the Belle Étoile suite. Belle Étoile means beautiful star, if you didn't know. And on the right, this luxurious bathroom. I gave this presentation last summer in Auburn, and I asked the audience, how much do you think a room like this would cost per night? Think about that. A lady was brave enough. She said, maybe $1,000 a night. And I said, well, that is a lot. I mean, it's way more than I would ever pay, but actually $20,000 a night to stay there. So obviously, this is for people for whom money is no object, like famous rock stars. Okay, so that's Le Meurice. Now we're going to talk about dining in the city. This is obviously for cheapos. You could probably tell right away, especially seeing the truck there. But L'As du Falafel is in the fourth, it's in the Marais. It's in the Jewish area on the Rue des Rosiers. And there are actually a couple of restaurants like this. You see all the people. These places are swarmed at lunchtime, especially. And so we had heard about it. We went there, and for €5, you can get a delicious falafel sandwich. And even if you think you don't like falafel sandwiches, you should really try it. They are fantastic. You know, these little balls of chickpeas, fried chickpeas with lettuce and a beautiful sauce on there. And again, €5, you really can't beat it. So that would be a great way to save money at lunch. Another thing is that truck that I mentioned before. It's called Le Camion qui fume. Camion is truck, and it's the smoking truck because I don't know, they smoke. I guess they smoke their foods. It's basically a burger truck run by a California couple, and it has certain stops. It's not every day, but you'll see in the book, it tells you where it is. Like one of the stops I know is the new Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library, the François Mitterrand Library. And it stops there on certain days of the week. And, again, a very good price for a very good sandwich. And so if those kinds of things appeal to you, that's a good way of saving a little money on the trip. Another way is to go to a traiteur. Traiteur is a word that's very difficult to translate into English. Dictionaries usually tell us that they are caterers. Not exactly. It's a place that has prepared foods in it, and a lot of them are Asian, like this one. And the name of this one is Simple et Bon, Simple et Bon, which means simple and good. And it says, takeout. So plat emporté is for takeout. Some places like this have a couple of little tables and chairs inside, but for the most part, you can go in there, you can pick up something already cooked. It could be warm or cold, either way, and you could take it to a park and eat it, or you could take it back to your room and have lunch or dinner eating these foods. And it's not a sandwich all the time like the previous two. So that's the traiteur. At the opposite end of the spectrum, this is back to Beyonce's place. She is staying upstairs at this Le Meurice. But downstairs, very conveniently, there is a restaurant, an Alain Ducasse, French chef. He has several restaurants throughout the Paris region. This one is on the Rue de Rivoli. Like I said, it's where the hotel is. The average dinner there is €287. So it's quite pricey. I mean, you think of L'As du Falafel, €5, and then this one, $287. But maybe for a special occasion, you're willing to pay that. I don't know, but it is very luxurious and beautiful. Um, One thing that you can check out too is a website. It's kind of like Zagat, if you know what that is. Um, it's a website that rates restaurants around the town. It's called, in French, it's called La Fourchette, which is the fork. And it has an English website called exactly The Fork. So if you um, look for thefork.com, if you Google that, it will tell you a lot of different restaurants and the price ranges and the quality. You know, it's rated and it gives you the price. So that's the fork. My husband and I, probably through that website, though I can't swear to that, found this restaurant. This is in between the cheapo and the snob, and that's why we are cheapo snobs. But for special occasions, like I said, we seek out places like this. The year I believe was 2015. We were in Paris on our anniversary in August, and we had found this place called L'Assiette, which means the dish. It has a relatively well-known chef, you know, not Alain Ducasse, but it's in the 14th near where we were staying. And we had a wonderful meal. My husband had tête de veau, which is some kind of veal head, something or other. That's the kind of stuff he likes. And I had a lamb dish, a selle d'agneau. It was delicious. We had wine, we had dessert. I don't know if we had appetizers or not, but it was about 100 euros, you know. So it was a special occasion and we didn't mind paying it, and we did get a lovely meal. Since that time, in fact, I think it might have been just last year, my cousin's son was going to Paris and asked for a restaurant recommendation, and he went there and he really liked it. So I passed that along to you. But again, if you look on websites, you know, and they have like TripAdvisor and everything, you can check out all kinds of restaurants in the type of food that you are interested in. Okay. Any questions so far? All you have to do is write them in the chat. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on to attractions now. Before I speak, I just want to say that in book one, I have all of the most famous attractions, like the history of the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre and what else? The La Sainte-Chapelle Church and just Giverny and Versailles. They're all in book one. So this book has more of the attractions, just not those, because I didn't repeat from one book to another. This one, I'm sure some of you recognize. I will tell you a little bit about the background of it. Emperor Napoleon III, so Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew, was almost assassinated at the previous opera house that was in Paris at the time in the 19th century. So he had a competition. He launched a competition, and there were over 170 people who sent in plans for a new opera house. And the person who won, his name was Charles Garnier. This place was originally called l'Opéra Garnier. You can see the beautiful grand staircase and the hall where the operas used to take place. Nowadays, it's mostly for ballet, and that's why they changed it to Palais Garnier. The operas now take place, for the most part, at the Bastille Opera House. Anyway, Charles Garnier won the competition. His idea was there should be no space undecorated. And believe me, he succeeded in doing that. But it's not, I don't know, it's not disgustingly ornate. I think it's really beautifully tasteful. Also, a few years ago, my husband and I went there during the day, not to see an opera or a ballet, but they have self-guided tours. And at the time, I thought it was free, but it might have been several euros. Still, it was wonderful. You get to go around and see all of the different parts of the opera house. And so I would recommend that. And then if you want to pay a little bit more, you can get a guided tour of the opera house. Also, I want to point out before I go on that this is where the fictitious Phantom of the Opera was set. Um, the Chagall ceiling you see in the picture on the right, sort of half cut off, but they asked Marc Chagall, I forget the year, but maybe in the 1970s, to create a new ceiling for the Opera House. And he did. And people at the time applauded and they loved it. But, it's controversial. Anything new is always controversial. But what they did was interesting, too. They put the new ceiling on some kind of retractable apparatus that so it didn't ruin what's underneath, as far as I know. And so I thought that was a very nice idea, a way to say, well, we didn't destroy the old, we just added a new. One more thing about this, a baker in Paris was creating a new pâtisserie, a new pastry. And he made it and he said to his wife, well, I don't know what to call it. And she said that it reminded her of those loges, those seating arrangements, the balconies in the Paris Opera House. And so he called it Opéra. If you ever get the chance, go to a good bakery in Paris and get one of these opera cakes. They really are wonderful, crunchy and chocolatey and creamy. So good. Okay, on to the next attraction.
Jayne, can I
This
interject for a second? We have a
abs
comment and a question.
great.
Stephen mentioned that he also likes to stay in the 14th as well, and says it's less touristy and has some great street markets if you like to cook some of your own meals.
That's true. It also has a
out.
great fish market, a great cheese market, several cheese markets. We really like the 14th a lot, and you're with people who live there, which is really nice. What else do we like about the 14th? There's the Rue Daguerre, which is a pedestrian walkway, and that's where one of the wonderful cheese shops is located. Yeah, we like it a lot, and it's historical. Um, we uh, we enjoyed it just walking around the 14th, and like I said, it wasn't too far. So thank you for that comment. And you said that another person
Yes,
had a
someone
question.
else, Anne had a question. She says they've rented apartments through Verbo or VRBO and wondered if you had done the same.
We have not. We did. I'll tell you the story. In 2020, in January, we went to France. We went to Collioure, which is down in the south, and we rented a house there. And that's when COVID hit, and we had rented a VRBO, but we had to cancel it. I know other people who have done that, and we are planning to do that this August. We're planning on going back to France with my brother and his wife. So the answer is no, but almost. I almost got a Verbo. Um, apparently, VRBO and Home Away have joined, but yeah, I think that they're pretty safe. I think that again, pay attention to those things I told you about. What floor is it on? What arrondissement is it in? How many square meters? And I don't think you'll have a bad experience. In fact, I think it's a good idea. Anything else, Hannah?
That's it so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I was going to say this building was built in the 19th century, and it reflected all of the turmoil that was going on politically in Paris at the time, in France at the time. First, it was when the religious people were in charge, it was a church. Then, when they were kicked out, it was a mausoleum. Then back to the church, then back to a mausoleum, and now it is a mausoleum that looks like a church. The name of it is the Pantheon, and it's in the fifth arrondissement. What they did to transform it, they didn't do a whole lot to change the church, but they did brick in some of the windows you can see up there where those columns are all around. They bricked them in so that the interior of the Pantheon would have a more funereal look. They wanted it to be darker, not quite so bright and cheery. We have gone there years ago, really a long time ago. But it's interesting because a lot of very famous French people, in fact, some of the people I'm going to talk about tonight, well, at least one of them, Victor Hugo is buried there, Émile Zola, so two authors. Also, the Curies, Marie Curie and her husband Pierre, are both buried there. And most recently, and you might find this interesting, Josephine Baker, who you know was a an entertainer, but during World War II, the Germans probably thought that she was just a daffy singer, you know, because she kind of clowned around when she was performing. But she was very smart and had a very good memory and wrote down things to share with the resistance. So after World War II, she was awarded the Croix de Guerre, you know, the War Medal, War Cross. Um, and she had a big funeral in Paris, I believe at the Madeleine Church. And then just last year, her body was transported. That's a very big honor. And as far as I know, she's the only American who, at least of her own merit, was buried in the Pantheon. So again, a beautiful place to see, an interesting place to see as well. Okay. This location you might recognize, but it is not in Paris. It's about a half hour's ride outside. What I say in the book is if you don't want to fight the crowds at Versailles, and believe me, you will fight the crowds at Versailles, or if you don't feel like driving to the Loire Valley to see all those castles, this is a very nice alternative, very nice and very historical. For 800 years, it was the home to monarchs, including Francois Ier, who transformed it from a hunting lodge into this sumptuous chateau. But actually, every monarch kept adding on. I forget how many rooms there are. There's something like 1,600. It's really not all of them are open to the public. You'll probably be happy to know, because who would want to traipse through all of those rooms? But you can see the beautiful ceilings, the beautiful wall decorations. There are beautiful gardens as well. And Napoleon Bonaparte, when he lived here, had the furniture, the historical furniture, tracked down and a lot of it brought back to Fontainebleau. So it's really worth a trip. Again, excuse me, this is not a place that I have been to recently, but the history has always been there. Good. Now we're going to talk about some of the people. There are a lot of people in the book. I think it was 94 people from various occupations. And first, we're going to talk about actors. This woman, when she was 15 years old, was you could see a very pretty young woman. She was on the cover of Elle magazine, and she got noticed, especially by a director named Roger Vadim, whose name might ring a bell because among his wives was Jane Fonda at one point. Roger Vadim cast her in her first film, which you see in the middle, and it was called And God Created Woman. I wrote down the year, 1956. She was so pretty, too, that the people who are in charge of the statue you see on the right, Marianne, is a symbol of France, just like, well, not exactly, like Uncle Sam. You know, we have Uncle Sam, symbol of America. They have Marianne, symbol of France. And Brigitte Bardot is her name, was the first real person used as a model for Marianne. It has changed since then. You know, different people. Catherine Deneuve at one point was the model. So now it's a thing, you know, to have a real person. But Brigitte Bardot was the first. Okay. This person, I would really be interested to know if any of you have ever heard of him. He was a man who he was interested in magic, and then he became interested in photography, and he was a pioneer of filmmaking. His name is Georges Méliès. And you can see on the left, that's him painting these individual pictures. So he would take individual shots of these pictures that he made, and he would put them together. He was the first person to create a narration telling a story through film. You can see A Trip to the Moon. I think that was 1902. one of his first ones. Unfortunately, of the 500 or more short films that he made, many of them are lost. But there are a couple, Trip to the Moon, and oh, I forget the other one, what it's called, A Voyage something. I can't remember, sorry. But anyway, uh, he was a real groundbreaking figure in film. So before Lucas and Spielberg, there was Méliès. And when you go to France today, I mean, when we were there in the South in 2020, you know, I saw Boulevard Méliès. I mean, they haven't forgotten him over there. And more people should know about him, I would say. Another filmmaker, I don't know if you know this man, but he created two of my favorite films, and there they are: La Grande Illusion, Great Illusion. I think they call it Grand Illusion in English, and La Règle du Jeu, which we call Rules of the Game. And you can see his name on the poster on the right. His name is Jean Renoir. The Renoir part probably rings a bell. He is the son, was the son of Pierre Auguste Renoir, the painter. And what they said about Jean is that he painted with a camera. And that is so true. These films are wonderful. They are artistic. They both tell very good, important stories. The first one about World War One, and the second one about the aristocracy in France. Um, he, at a certain point, decided he would move to the US. It might have been during World War II. I'm not exactly sure. But he worked for 20th Century Fox, but he found their ideas so backward that he called them 16th Century Fox. He was very unhappy in Hollywood because they didn't appreciate his artistic side, his artistic rendering of these films. So if you get the chance, I am pretty sure that Patent Library can either get you hooked up with someone who can stream that film for you, one of those films. Yes, Hannah says yes. Or they might just be there on the shelf too for you to take home and try. Did
Yeah,
you
we
want to
can
say
find them
something?
for you somewhere for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Okay. I was sure of it. Anyway, Jean Renoir, wonderful movies. You know, again, you have to like black and white films. You have to like old films, but really, I mean, these are two classics that are just fantastic. Now we go on to an architect. If you have walked around Paris, you've seen some of these fancy entrances to the subway. You can see Metropolitain. The metro entrances, he is the one who created them. He had this Art Deco, no, excuse me, Art Nouveau style. I believe I said that right. Yeah, Art Nouveau style. And they're everywhere. Most of them are copies or new renditions of his work. But his name is Hector Guimard. He didn't just do subway entrances. He also, excuse me, also did, you see on the left, a lot of homes, especially in the 16th arrondissement. The 16th, as many of you know, is the rich area of France, of Paris. Across the river from the Eiffel Tower on the right bank. This one on the left, on the bottom left, is called Castel Béranger. I have not seen it in person, but next time I go to Paris, preferably in August, I will look up some of this stuff. I really love the furniture he did. You can see on the right the desk and the chair. I love that style. I love that Art Nouveau style. And he was extremely talented. So anyway, Hector Guimard. Maybe you never heard of him, but I think he's pretty cool. This person I am pretty sure you have heard of because there have been several movies like the one on the right, which is 1988 movie with Isabelle Adjani. Her real picture is there on the left. She was a sculptress, and at the time, that was not something for women. In fact, some of the things that she created, people criticized, saying that they were virile and unseemly for a woman. But she she was taking courses in sculpture in Paris. And at one point, the teacher had to leave, and he had Rodin come in and become the teacher. Well, then he also became this woman's lover, and she worked with him. Her name is Camille Claudel, which you might have guessed if you have seen that movie or any of the other movies. There's a more recent one, I think possibly with Juliette Binoche. But anyway, extremely talented sculptress. And you see that the sculpture in the middle of the two people dancing. It was called the waltz, and apparently Claude Debussy had that on his desk for his whole life. You know, after she gave it to him, he never got rid of it. But Rodin refused to leave his longtime companion and marry Camille Claudel, and it led to all kinds of mental breakdowns for her, and possibly even abortions maybe children that she conceived while with Rodin. And at one point, she destroyed a lot of her works, which you might know if you have seen these films. And after she destroyed the works, she was put in an institution, and she remained there for the rest of her life. Sad story, a wonderful artist. Speaking of wonderful artists, here's another one that I really love. A lot of her works can be seen there's a Marmottan Museum. Maybe you know it. I can't remember which arrondissement that's in. It's a little bit far out, but it might be in the 16th. It's now called the Marmottan Monet Museum, but it has works by Berthe Morisot there also. She came to Paris, and she met Edouard Manet, and she married his brother, Eugène. She is a painter, as you can see, who is very well known for her transparencies. I love these pictures, like the one on the left, the man with the hat, and you can see like those lace curtains. I can't imagine how difficult that is to do. So she was a person who had a lot of talent, and Manet recognized it. He didn't think that all women could paint, but he did think Morisot could paint. The woman in the middle is called A Young Woman with a Fan, but again, you see the beautiful lace around her bodice. And on the right, this is a very well-known painting called The Cradle that she did in 1872. And again, the transparencies, and you can see the baby through it. I think it's just really remarkable. Now we're going to authors. We have a couple of authors. This one, I think you can guess, right? When you see Les Miserables there in the middle, which was first a novel and then movies and Broadway plays, Les Mis, people always talk about it and everything. He was the one who created it. He also created a book we call The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which the French call, oh boy, now it just went out of my head, Notre Dame de Paris, that's it. His name is Victor Hugo. He lived on the building on the bottom right at Place des Vosges. And the great thing about it is that you can go and visit where he lived. It's a free museum. So cheapos alert. He was a poet and a novelist and also a politician. And he adored Napoleon Bonaparte. But when Napoleon III, the nephew, came to power, Hugo really didn't like him and his policies. And so then Hugo had to self-exile in one of those small islands, Jersey or Guernsey, north of off the northern coast of France. So he was in exile for a while. But anyway, think about going to that museum. Like I said, the main collection that's always there is free and very, very interesting. This is another author that I really enjoy. His father went bankrupt when he was just a teen, and as a result, Daudet had to go to work. And that middle book, that was an semi-autobiographical novel that he wrote called Le Petit Chose, which means like little whatchamacallit, which is probably what the students at the school called him because he was small in stature. He absolutely hated it. He was like a tutor at this school, and he felt like he was just tortured there. So that was not for him. So he did stick to writing, and Lettres de mon Moulin, it's probably translated into English, but if you read French, last fall I did a Midco Senior College course, and we read one of his stories from that. They're just so charming. In fact, the word charm always comes up when people talk about his writings. At his funeral, Émile Zola talked about the profound charm of Daudet's works. His politics are a whole different thing, but we won't get into that right now. Okay, another author, a woman who had a very happy childhood. And then at age 20, she met this womanizing man named Willy, who married her at age 20 and moved her to Paris. He called himself an author, but he was really he had ghost authors writing with him. And then at one point, he asked his wife, whose name was Gabrielle Sidonie Colette, and who just goes by Colette now in her writings. Anyway, he asked her, as his young wife, to write down her memories of childhood, and it became Claudine, a Claudine series. Claudine à l'école, so Claudine in school, was a big hit. And of course, then she had to keep producing, and he would actually lock her in her room to make her write. Eventually, she ditched him. Good thing. And she went on to write other books. Chérie, I don't know if you've read it. I read it, about a woman having an affair with a much younger man. And then Gigi, which you probably have heard of because we've almost all seen the movie with Leslie Caron and Maurice Chevalier. Anyway, that is Colette. Now we go on to music. One of my proofreader who lives in Georgetown, when she read the part that I wrote about this guy, his name is Erik Satie, she said, Erik Satie was a weirdo, and that's pretty right on target. Let's call him eccentric. He was eccentric. He wrote some beautiful music, including this Gymnopédie, which Blood, Sweat, and Tears took, and they redid it kind of like in their own style, but they gave the attribution to Erik Satie. So very beautiful music. I would try to sing it for you, but you wouldn't like that. The reason that I put the obelisk in Place de la Concorde in there is because to show you his eccentricity. One time during the bombing of World War I, someone saw him lying at the base of the obelisk writing music, while bombs were falling. So a little strange. And then on the far right, he also, at his death, they went into his apartment, and apparently he was a hoarder, and there was just stuff all over the place, including pieces of music that he had written and not published or anything, and they were just lying there in a pile of junk. And he had two pianos, one placed on top of another. So you can see that he does merit that eccentricity title. Another singer, this person you might have heard of. He grew up in an Armenian family. He was born in Paris. His family knew what it was like to be persecuted. So during World War II, they hid Jews and gays and other people who were being persecuted by the Nazis. And because of that, he was awarded the Raoul Wallenberg Award later in life. You see that on the far right, okay? But meanwhile, getting back to his younger days, Charles Aznavour was a protege of Edith Piaf. You see them together there in the second picture. She helped him choose songs that fit his voice. She also had him get a nose job, which improved his appearance. Because at first, critics said horrible things like he had odd looks and an unappealing voice. Well, haha, he had a 70-year career. He just died like pretty recently. He lived into his 90s, I believe. But La Bohème is one of his famous songs. And yeah, you can ask your smart speaker to play songs by him. She'll know him. She'll know his songs too. Now we go to fashion design. This person um, is seen in the second picture fitting one of her famous suits onto Romy Schneider. Romy Schneider was an actress who appears in book 3 of my series. And the fashion designer's name is Coco Chanel. Her original name was Gabrielle, just like Colette. Colette was Gabrielle Sidonie, and Coco Chanel just got that name because before she became a fashion designer, she tried singing, and one of the songs had Coco in the title, and I don't know, they started calling her that. One thing that has only recently been discovered about Coco Chanel is that in World War II, she was a German agent. She had an affair with this man, a German, a Nazi officer who was based in Paris, very handsome guy. Um, and she was willing even to go to Spain and try to, I don't know, deliver messages for the Nazis or whatever. But the picture, she had an apartment in Paris on the Rue Cambon, but she also had a suite at the Ritz because she was very successful. She started out just as a hat designer, but then, it grew and grew, and she really had an eye for fashion, obviously, because, everybody still knows her name. This picture at the Ritz, her suite was actually on the 3rd floor of the Ritz. But then after she died, they kept some of her memorabilia and they moved the suite, all the decorations and everything, down 1 floor so that people who want to rent that suite at the Ritz would have a better view of the Place Vendôme. So again, back to Beyonce, you're going to pay $20,000 a night to stay in Coco Chanel's apartment. But think of all the great things. You can go to the Ritz bar and you can see all of her memorabilia, and it's not all of memorabilia, but some of her memorabilia is still included in there. Be aware though that during the holidays the price rises to like the $30,000 a night range. This man you probably recognize right away, I'm figuring. He, in the picture in the middle, you can see how tall he was, so much taller than all of the other people in the picture. And they called him 2 meters, 2 meters, because he was about 2 meters tall. So he was, I don't know, 6'7", 6'8", something like that. Extremely tall for that generation. And his name is Charles de Gaulle. In April, on April 18th, 1940, he, as an army officer, went to London and gave a broadcast talking about the French, how they had been invaded by the Nazis. And he said, "We lost a battle, we have not lost the war." And then he was the person who was behind the resistance. He did a lot for his country. Previous to this, in World War I, he was a soldier under Pétain, and he really idolized Pétain. But most of us know that Pétain during World War II became a collaborator with the Nazis. So then de Gaulle was not so proud of him. One thing I wanted to show is that we have this idea of him as a tough guy and him saying inappropriate things about Quebec and whatever. But on the lower right, he had a daughter, Anne, whom he really loved, who was a Down syndrome child. And I thought this was sweet, showing the tender side of a tough guy. Here's another soldier. He had gone to the École Militaire, the military school in Paris. He had very good grades. I think he was like 9th in his class. But he was Jewish, and some of the officers didn't like it, and they said there shouldn't be a Jew in the officer training school. So he faced anti-Semitism early on. During let's see, I don't know what year it was. Let's see. It was, I'm not sure. At a certain point, the French were aware that someone in his office or I don't know, building was passing notes to the Germans about French military installations. Based solely upon his handwriting, they thought that it was Dreyfus. And he was degraded in the military, from the military in the École Militaire. They cut the buttons off his coat, as was the practice. They broke his sword in half, and they sent him to Devil's Island for 4 years. Even after even after the army found out who the real spy was, they kept it a secret, and it was terrible. They kept him in prison, imprisoned out there on the island off of South America, Devil's Island, and it broke him body and soul. And this is why Zola wrote his famous letter, J'accuse, meaning I accuse, and he accused the military of keeping this a secret. I'm running out of time, but I really want to tell you about Louis Blériot. He was a pioneer pilot. You can see him with a handlebar mustache. He experimented with making all kinds of planes like box kite planes and gliders. He had over 50 crashes. And then after he saw one of the Wright brothers do a performance in France, he started building his own planes. And he had made a fortune developing headlights for cars. And so he had all of these planes built. And a London newspaper ran a story that they would give £1,000 to someone who could fly across the English Channel, and he did it, though they said the landing was a bit rough. But anyway, he went on to have a career selling his airplanes to different countries. The last main guy I'm going to talk about is Louis Pasteur, the father of microbiology. He was in Lille in the north of France, and a distiller came up to him and said, "Why does some of my product go bad, spoil?" And Pasteur had the idea of putting it underneath a microscope, and he saw that not only yeast was moving in there, but something else was moving, and he discovered germs. But he was only a chemist, and a lot of the medical community didn't accept him, so he had to develop kind of a hard exterior, harsh tongue to deal with them. He's a hero, though. He not only worked on germs, but he found cures for rabies and yellow fever and all kinds of things. And that's his burial place at the Musée Pasteur in Paris. There are many others. I don't have a lot of time. I really want you to ask questions. Edith Piaf, that we talked about before, Auguste Rodin, who we talked about in relation to Camille Claudel, Jacques Pepin, who is much older now, but we love him. We think of him as American, but he's French. Jacques Cousteau, and there's the famous Monsieur Pétain, Maréchal Pétain. Voila. Okay, and those are my books, and that is all. So I do hope you have questions. I would love to answer them, and I hope I didn't take too much time.
That was great, Jayne. Thank you so much. We've got just a couple minutes. We've got a couple questions that came in.
Okay.
First, Elaine asked, what subjects do you and your husband teach?
Ah, well, very good. I like that question. My husband is a philosophy professor. He taught at Siena College for most of his career in Albany, New York. He has several books on food and philosophy, and other books on John Dewey, which was what his dissertation was based on, John Dewey. I was a high school French teacher who became a college French professor. I have a lot of articles on Haitian Francophone literature. I also have an article on Fred Vargas, who is a French mystery writer, a woman named Fred, go figure. And then I have these 3 books. So that's me. Thankful. Somebody's put thankful. Okay. Yes.
And then you answered a lot of this already, but Lauren asked, as a first-time traveler to France, what should I do to prepare myself? So any last couple of tips that you didn't already go over?
Well, not to just pat myself on the back, but my first book has a lot of helpful information in it about what to pack, how to travel around the city, things to see, things to do, shopping, all of those things. I think that would be a good start for you. I saw another question just popped up. It said, what's a good time to go? Try to avoid the summer. It's so packed. And if you think you're going to see the Mona Lisa, guess again. I mean, she would be like a little postage stamp really far away because there would be so many people in front of you. The spring, especially early May, or even, anytime in May would be wonderful. September, also a wonderful time to go. We are going in August because we have things going on, and so August is not going to be the greatest, but it's going to be the end of August, so it's almost September. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Anything else there, Hannah?
Yes, let's see. One more just came through. Leslie would like to know, what other classes have you taught through senior college?
Oh, okay. I taught 2 introductory courses, basically vocabulary building with 1 short story for each class. I did that for 2 times in a row, 2 years in a row. Then this year I did short story classes. Like I said, Daudet was one of them, but it was a francophone thing. So there were authors from Vietnam, and anybody who wrote in French was able to appear. A lot of to Quebec stories were in there as well. And then this fall, I hope to teach a course using a novel, but just reading it in little clumps, not the whole thing all at once. But we do discuss in French, and it went wonderfully in the fall. The students were so great and so enthusiastic. It was wonderful for me.
That's great.
What else have we got?
Any other questions coming through? Well, while you're all thinking of questions, let me just let you know that you can put the first 2 Cheapo Snob books on hold. It doesn't look like we have them at Patton right now, but other libraries have them. So you can put them on hold through the catalog. And I did put a link in the chat if anybody wants to jump on that. I believe you said they're at the bookstore in Brunswick as well.
Yes, Gulf of Maine has
Gulf of Maine
all
books.
3. They have all 3 copy, not 3 copies, but all 3 books. They have several copies of each one. Also, book 1 is at in Damariscotta at the Sherman bookstore as well.
Great, you're everywhere.
Great, thank you.
And then before we go, I'm going to, if you have any feedback, if anyone who came to watch tonight has any feedback for us, I'm going to put a link to our feedback form in the chat. Good, bad, whatever. Just want to say hi. We love to hear from you. And then Armchair Traveler will be back again. March 8th is the date of the next one on Zoom again, and it's going to be all about Germany.
Oh, very nice.
It should be fascinating. We're doing Europe this year. It's just kind of worked out that way. Anyone have any more questions before we go? I think we've
comments,
whatever. I think we've got all the ones that I've seen in the chat. Jayne, any last minute anything about Paris?
Well, just thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate you devoting some time to this. And again, thank you, Hannah, for all your help. And there's somebody who says something. Let's see.
Oh, Anne had to cancel her 2020 trip, but she's looking forward to going again next year.
I feel you. I know. Like I said, we were in Collioure down in the south of France, and we were supposed to go to Paris, and we had to cancel that part. And we were stuck over there for a while, trying to get out because the airports near us were closed. But hey, things are looking up now.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all so much. It was really a delight for me. Wish I could have seen your faces and heard your voices, but we did what we could.
Thank you so much, Jayne. Thanks for coming,
Hannah.
everyone. Happy travels.
Bye.
Bye.